Welcome back to Rick's Scale Model Fix and part 2 of our new video build looking at Airfix's brand new 1/72 scale Airfix Mosquito B16. At the end of part 1 we'd reached the stage in the build where we were going to be looking at the undersurface and the completion of the bomb bay. Airfix give you optional parts for a closed or open bomb bay, but the more I was thinking about the associated issues with this area of the kit that were raising the head online, I elected to do some research, and it would appear that Airfix have made a slight boo-boo with this one, in that they've depicted the bomb bay with and rear fairing associated to the target tug aircraft that they actually looked at on display at the RF Museum in Cosford. Now usually in these video builds I would build the kit straight out the box so that you, the modeller, can make an appraisal of whether the kit is for you and whether you want to buy it. But I just couldn't live with this because it's too far away from what it really should look like. So we set about modifying the parts. So the correction for this is really quite straightforward, and the problem with the kit stems way back to the beginning of the build. And as we can see for part C2, this is the fairing associated with the target tug version, and what this allows is the target tug to be mechanism to drag the banners out through the rear of the airframe. In order to correct this, fairing should be a complete sort of half moon shape at the rear of the bomb bay. So it's quite easy fix really, just to build that area up with filler and sand it into the correct shape as we have done there. So the kit's bomb bay depicts the target tug version with the banner pockets on each side of the bomb bay doors, which allow the banners to be let into the airstream and dragged out behind the aircraft. So doing some basic research, it just looked as though in the simplest format that these pockets could be just sanded off, and to that I consulted the Mosquito Comprehensive Guide for the Modeller by Richard Franks from Sam Publications. That has some line drawings and profiles in there that will help you. Alternatively, been on Facebook this morning and it seems Freight Dog models are ahead of the game, and they've got a pending conversion for release in September 21. So that would be an easier route unless you want to do the conversion yourself. So to that end we're going to pick up with our build video, and I have used the single bomb bay door as a mask while I've built that area up, and it was noted that the fit of this part wasn't brilliant. It was a little bit narrow, but that was easily corrected by just placing the item on the workbench and just pressing it down until the plastic splayed out a little, forcing it beyond its memory, and that was then a perfect fit. I'm going to have the bomb bay open on mine, so I have now removed the banner pocket from this one, and I will repeat that on the other airframe. So we're now picking up sort of with the bomb bay doors, and what we're looking at here is I think that this is going to be left until we've got the model painted. So I'm going to use the scrap single piece bomb bay as a mask, and I'm going to glue that in with some PVA, and that's simply just going to protect what we've already done on the inside of the bomb bay there. So I'm just going to put a couple of beads of PVA. It doesn't need much. If you want your bomb bay in the closed position, you're going to still have to remove those banner pockets, but you're also going to have to scribe a panel line down the centre. So we'll just tack in that in place, wiping off the excess white glue, and that can be easily removed once we've painted the model, and it just preserves the work in the bomb bay. Elsewhere, I've primed some bits and pieces around the model just to make sure that the seam worked and everything was up to scratch as we're hurtling headlong into applying some primer to this model. So like we said at the back of part 1, the wingtips fit perfectly. I've added the circular panel to the spine. I've left the clear lens from the ventral sort of belly side of the airframe. I'll paint that silver and I'll drop some crystal clear in there at the end. Same with the wingtip, the wing light, navigation lights, landing lights, what have you. Just making sure that Bombay's next. I'll mask off the nose, but we need to start looking at things like adding the landing light now to see what the fit is, and perhaps adding the canopy as well. So I've just been doing some work off camera to get the Mosquito ready for primer. So we've masked up the cockpit, and we've done the old trick with burnishing down Tamiya tape and cutting round the frames with a knife blade. We've added and polished the landing light to the leading edge of the starboard wing and masked up the wingtip lights. We've added the pitot at the tail. I don't like Airfix's way of taking a chunk out the tail as well. I much prefer to replace these and make them out of Albion alloys tubing, far more realistic in scale. But nonetheless, we've got what we've got, so that's been done. Underneath, the Bombay is now dry, and that's secured in place so that we're ready to prime the Mosquito. Just at the front, as you know, it's my intention to glaze those little windows with crystal clear. So they've been masked from the inside, and the opening at the nose has been masked with some wet kitchen paper. So the first colour we're going to add to the kit is the interior green for the internal surfaces of the canopy framework. And it's also a good idea at this point to just check your canopy framework for any gaps. You've got a little gap down at the front windscreen side. So before we go into top colour, I'll run another bead of PVA along there just to fill that. But we'll carry on adding our green. So the next colour to go on top is black, and this is just to help make the canopy look as though it's solid and not made of clear plastic, so when it's viewed it doesn't look as though any light will come through the canopy framework. This is just a bit thicker, this paint. And we'll allow that to dry. And the next coat to go on top of this will be the primer itself, in which case we're using AK's interactive grey primer and microfiller. So we're just going to start building this up over the airframe. So with the primer all nicely applied and smooth, and the fuselage checked for any errors, any glue marks, and masked up, it's time to think about getting some colours on our model. There's plenty of ways of replicating camo patterns on models, but the one I prefer is to just enlarge a copy of the kit's instructions up to the same scale and use these as templates. So with that in mind, we work on a section at a time. So usually look at which is the best pattern, and we'll go with this port wing, and we'll cut out this grey section. And then we'll transfer this over to the model. And using very light pressure from a pencil, we're just going to draw the outline of the camouflage onto the surface primer. And we're just going to fill in and make sure we've got some lines to follow with the airbrush. Like so. So after quite some time we've managed to get the ocean grey camouflage pattern down on the surface of the airframe. For this we've used X006 REF Ocean Grey from the Extra Colour range, thinned with cellulose thinners 70%, 30% paint, and with a few drops of rusting dryers in to speed up the notoriously slow drying time of the Extra Colour paints. So it's now time to get the dark green on, so join me back in a bit and we'll have a look at the results. So after a few hours at the workbench, we've now got the ocean grey and RF dark green on our Mosquito. So it's all been sprayed using Extra Colour, and as we hinted in the previous section, the drying time of these enamels can be considerable. Certainly can take weeks rather than days. So I think, as I mentioned in the section, the drying time can be accelerated by using a few drops of Rustin's dryers. That literally speeds up the drying time of these paints to hours, but this has now been left for 48 hours just to make sure that the paint has indeed dried. It's still going to remain soft for a while, so whilst we work on other areas of the airframe and the model, this can be sat aside to dry. And just to protect that, I'm now going to give this a good coat of Mr. Hobby GX112, which is clear gloss, just to protect that finish and make sure that it dries hard with a nice barrier coat on, and preparation for masking for the medium sea grey undersurfaces. So we've just spent some time masking the Mosquito up to spray the undersurface camouflage. Now, many of you might be scratching your head as to why I've done that, but it just makes it easier to mask, such as the engine panels and the tops of the cowlings, because we're now not having to mask the paler medium sea grey around the exhaust stacks. So we've now got the demarcation line there, which is now protected by the masking tape, rather than it being here, which they would then have to go over the exhausts and run the risk of breaking those. So we've got some tricky spraying angles to get into. So this is just going to be a question of taking our time now where we apply the medium sea grey, low air pressure, build it up slowly, being mindful of any overspray. We don't want to ruin our upper surface camouflage. So I'll crack on and join me in a bit. There's quite a lot been going on at the bench. So with the medium sea grey on the undersurfaces of our Mosquito, this was then put aside to dry. and we started looking at some of the smaller ancillary items while that extra colour paint dried. So we already had the undercarriage built up, so that's been now painted in alclad duraluminium. The wheels and the hubs have been painted and glued together. Slipper tanks, or the wing fuel tanks, are ready for primer and paint, and I've started work on the propeller blades, so they've been sprayed guns tyre black and the tips masked off in sprayed with white primer and then yellow, and the hub and spinner section has been painted with extra acrylics PIU blue. So everything's coming together quite well. All the smaller bits are now pretty much done. We just need to do some detail painting, and I've also made a start on modifying the bomb bay doors. So we're going to have these in the open position, and I'm going to get a £4,000 cookie bomb out of the bomber resupply set and just have that posed on the trolley underneath the aircraft, as it was quite unique and that's what it was designed to carry. So it'll be showing the different versions of the Mosquito. So to modify the bomb bays, we need to remove the target tug banner pocket and some of the raised detail and just sand that smooth as such. So we're just setting about modifying this other bomb bay door. So we've got to remove this raised detail from the flare pocket, from the banner pockets, and remove some of that. So we're just going to set about using Flory Models medium dual sander just to get rid of that raised detail. We're not pressing down too hard, we're just letting the sander do the work. We don't want to change the profile of the bomb bay door, we just want to remove the raised detail. So we're going in different directions so that we don't cause any flat spots, and then we're going to turn this over and use the sponge side until we get to the results that we want. So there we go, that's the modification completed for the bomb bay doors. So these need to be primed now, just checked for any standing stick scars, and then they can be added to our waiting model. So I've done quite a bit of work. We'd seen that I'd painted the undercarriage legs, and they've now dried and they've been glued in place and allowed to dry. And as we saw, the template way back in the beginning of the build has worked wonders, and they've just slotted straight into the recesses in the nacelles, and they've quite a strong, robust unit. However, before we start putting the gear and the gear doors on, we've weathered the undersurface of our Mosquito, so it's looking a bit weather beaten now, as if it's been used. Added a bit of Flory Models wash around the nacelles just to add a bit of dirt where the panels would be open and just make it look a little bit more used underneath. And the focus of attention now is the bomb bay. I've modified the bomb bay doors to the correct type, so we've sanded off these banner pockets on each side of the open bay doors, and we've added the hinges C15 and C14, and whilst they are a bit clunky and overscale, they're probably going to hold those Bombay doors in perfect alignment. So we've now started working on the internals of the Bombay. So we've added C6, which are the bomb racks, and whilst the fit is a little bit vague, it does have some lovely location diagrams here to aid the modeller. So one's got square pin, one's got a round pin. So this is the square pin one, and that's saying that it fits in there. And when you look closely, there is a little sort of bracket for it to butt up against, which is explained in this diagram. As you can see, those cutouts there. So that's in its location within its Bombay. It does wiggle around a bit in there, but we can simply secure that in place with some extra thin. Hopefully the camera can focus on that Bombay now. I think the gloss finish of the paintwork was throwing it a little bit, and that's in position. Turning the page and we see the addition of the bomb racks themselves. So we've got 2 for the forward end and 2 for the rear, so I'll just do the other ones. Again, just a little bit of extra thin. And it's starting to look like quite a well detailed Bombay in there. So I'm not going to be using the kit supplied bombs. I'm going to be raiding Airfix's bomber resupply set for its £4,000 cookie. As we said previously, this is what the type of aircraft was designed to carry, modified to carry, with those bulged Bombay doors. So it's only fitting, I think, that we show that, and we'll use a cookie. So off camera I've done quite a bit of work to the Mosquito just to try and get the video rolling along a little bit. So it's now ready pretty much for decals. So we've glued those pre-assembled props onto the nacelles. We've added the undercarriage, making sure we've got the flat spots in the right position. Bombay doors. We've started using some of the micro crystal clear to form the windows on the undersurface, just as a bit of experiment, just to make sure that they would look okay. And we've unmasked that canopy with quite good results being obtained overall. So it's just at the point of the build where we would start to add the decals, thinking about adding the decals. There's only really the undercarriage doors to add to complete the airframe. So with that, we'll draw a conclusion to this part of Airfix's 1/72 scale Mosquito build. Join me in the next part where we'll look at getting some markings on the model and final construction and reveal. So until then, everyone, please look after yourselves, stay well and take care.